Good evening, fellow YouTube model builders. Welcome to the Geno Show, YouTube Model Builders Presentation Hangouts for Tuesday, December 1st of 2015. Tonight our guest will be Andy Crawford, and we will be discussing the ins and outs of hand laying track. So I hope you all guys all brought your questions, and we'll try and get the answers for you. I also want to cover real quick, remember, YouTube Model Builders is your source for free model railroad information, such as our free online eMag, the live chat presentations that we have on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the monthly live show with myself and Big Bill Graham. And make sure you go to www.youtubemodelbuilders.com for all of our schedules and other information. So tonight, I'm filling in for our favorite guy, G-Man, because he's under the weather tonight. So it'll be Andy and I discussing hand-laid track. So what do you got for us tonight, Andy?
Okay, so a couple things. I haven't put a lot of a presentation together. We'll just talk our way through some of this stuff. A lot of it's just kind of a conversation about doing this stuff and how to do it, and etc. And I went Google image searched a couple things so I can show you a couple of the different methods that I don't personally do or don't do anymore. I have tried or done all of the major methods that I'm going to talk about at one time or another, and there's reasons to do all of them. So a couple concepts let's cover before we get into the kind of nitty-gritty of it is why a person might want to do it. So there's a couple reasons that a person might want to hand lay track. So, I mean, there's reasons like, for the gratification of doing it, just like scratch building buildings, there's a certain gratification in having constructed it ourselves. There's a certain kind of a pride factor in being able to show it off, that kind of thing. But there's some real tangible reasons why to do it. And the three that I really want to bring up are cost, quality or performance, and detail level. And those are not all mutually exclusive. You will not get all three of those if you choose a method. There are methods that are very, very cost effective, and there are methods that are a whole lot more expensive. And I started out thinking this hand laying my own track was going to be a lot less expensive, and it turns out the methods that I've ultimately chosen are much more expensive than the other way I could have done it, both time and money. But I couldn't be happier with the results, and I'll show you my method a little bit later. I started hand laying track in my teenage years, which was just a year or two ago. So I've been at this for a little bit, and we did it the traditional way: wood ties, sand them, spike rail. And it was kind of a rite of passage. I was in a club with a bunch of older guys, and we all are really. I mean, you're either 16 to 20, or you're off raising kids, and then you're back to modeling when you're 40, which is what happens to most of us. So, and it was kind of a rite of passage with those guys. It was just kind of I needed to learn how to hand lay track. But once I did, I fell in love with it. I couldn't imagine being able to lay out any other way myself. I could totally see the justification for flex track and hand laying turnouts, and that makes some sense for a lot of people, and I'm going to suggest some methods. So, if you're building a fairly large layout, you can hand build better performing, better spec turnouts at a much cheaper price, a quarter the price, half the price of buying commercial turnouts, especially if you're buying $55 curved turnouts or double slips or crossover diamonds. And it's really easy if you have a small space or a complicated layout to need a lot of those turnouts. My layout is majority of the turnouts are curved in some way or another. And on the prototype, a whole lot of turnouts are curved. I don't think that much about doing that way. But you can do it a lot cheaper. That's cost. Performance. There's only one turnout manufacturer made that meets the NMRA spec, and that's Micro Engineering. And they make a pretty doggone good turnout. And they make everything you could want, as long as you want a number 6, left or right, in code 83 or code 70. That's it. They don't make anything else. There's no number 8s, no double slips, no nothing. That's it. They make that one thing, and they do it right. It's great. I would also suggest that in everything, the NMRA standards are an absolutely great thing. The NMRA standards made the hobby impossible to be as popular as it is today. If the NMRA had not standardized everything, we would be running Bachmann trains on Bachmann track and lifelike trains on lifelike track and Walther's trains on Walther's track, et cetera, et cetera. There would be no standards. Thank God for the NMRA. However, everybody has looked at their standards as the way to do it, and it's not the way to look at it. They are a standard, a minimum requirement to meet operation. If you really want quality performance and quality track work, we've got to go a little further than NMRA specs. Hand laying lets us do that. But sadly, the NMRA being the minimum standard, only one turnout beats it. And that causes problems. Any of us that have operated trains for any period of time on our own layouts or others will have realized that the vast majority of derailments are on turnouts. Nearly all derailments are on turnouts. And there's a bunch of reasons why that's true. The points are most often stamped metal in a little L shape as opposed to a piece of rail. They don't have any strength or rigidity to wear out. And the guardrails and frog, most importantly, have some bad tendencies by design. One is the gaps are just much too wide. And they did that on purpose so that all your equipment does not have to be engaged exactly correctly, and they allow for more flexibility. But that results in a layout that's much less reliable. And if you would just gauge your wheels and run a tighter tolerances on the flangeways, your trains would run better.
I've run into that plenty of times in our club layout. Always, especially when people over ballast things, little tiny grains of ballast get in there, and the wheels are too tight or too wide.
Yep.
The other thing too is the width of the tread of the wheel. I have problems with that with Pico inso frogs because it can bridge the gap in the frog and short the rails out too.
Oh yeah, well, we've had electrical problems forever. I mean, DCC is an amazing thing for the hobby, but it really brought to bear a lot of really bad tendencies that we had in track work, things that we weren't doing right that we should have been doing even in the DC days. But DCC made it a big deal, like how we insulated frogs, etc.
Yeah.
So anyway, performance is a big incentive for hand laying track. It was my incentive for hand laying track all these years. However, recently I started getting into the super detailing of track work. I mean, the locomotives and rolling stock that we buy out of the box, separate grab irons and all this other stuff, that all it needs is a little weathering to be a museum quality model. They look great, and then we stick them on toy track. The level of detail that you can achieve is phenomenal. And before we go a whole lot further, let's just give you a little bit of an incentive for what we're talking about here. So that is an HO scale turnout. That's not a prototype. That's not one-to-one. That is an HO scale turnout. It has a proper point rail. It has all the point detail and bolts and all the little plates and everything like you'd expect. And that took that man a minute to build, but it's right. Not only does it run absolutely proper and perfect, but it's gorgeous. And you can do this kind of detail. You can't do that with plastic components. You just can't achieve that level of realism. So detail is and we're in the matrix. All right, detail has become a big motivator for me. Although there's nothing wrong with rails like wood ties. Still, it looks great. It can totally look great, and especially if you're doing narrow gauge, there's no excuse for it. So now let's talk about the methods that you can choose to do it. So, and depending on whether cost is your motivator or just performance is your motivator, or whether you're trying to achieve a certain level of quality of detail, and one thing I want to encourage you to think about when it comes to detail is you are going to look at the track more than anything else. You're going to look at the turnouts that your locomotives are approaching to make sure they're in alignment. You're going to be looking at the road bed, along your trackage as you operate the railroad. There's more, short of a locomotive that's really awesome, people will look at your track work more than anything else. People say that you can't see the detail if you put it there. No, you can't see both plates because you didn't put them there. You put them there, they're visible, especially in HO scale. I would take some argument. In HO scale and up, put it there. The vast majority of people, not all, vast majority of people can any of those details. So let's talk about how you can do it. So the old standby, back Frank Ellison in 1930, the late 30s, World Fair layout that was built in 26, I think. The first meeting model railroad ever put together was the World's Fair layout. They were headlight. John Allen, my idol in the hobby, and his covers of model railroader got a great many of us off from plywood and into serious model railroading. He hand laid track, and he did it in this traditional way. That is, ties, spikes, straight or glued directly to Pulvisode or some other material. Pulvisode is kind of most of their choice. They used to use Silatiles a lot. There's a lot of methods, but glue down to something and spike the rail to it. That looks pretty decent. It does get the job done, and it looks like this. And relatively cheap. It's ties and rail. And spiking works. There's some tricks to make it more effective or to do it faster, but ultimately, spiking to wood ties has worked for the better part of 100 years for model railroaders, and it does the job. If you're a narrow gauge person, where they didn't have bolt plates anyway, you're not missing a thing with this method of laying track. I mean, it's as adequate as it.
The question I have here, Andy, on that, do you glue the rail down as well as spike it, or just glue the ties and spike to the rail end?
If I was just doing spiking direct, I would glue the ties down and then sand the surface of them to get them semi-level.
Okay.
That's the reason I've always done it that way, and I had to invent a method that I'll show you here in a minute with the way I'm building track today, where I cannot lay the ties down rigidly and sand the surface of them. They have to be prepped before they go in because they get all these little detail parts on them.
Right.
I had to invent a method to deal with that. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody else do what I'm doing. It works, and I'll show it to you.
Well, that's cool.
The next way that's becoming really popular is soldering to PC board ties. That has become really popular because of fast track. Tim Warris, a number of years ago, come out with a method. He started out building his own layout and couldn't use commercial components for it. So he invented a method to solve his own problem, scratch his own ink. And he created this method. He didn't even create this method. This method had been around before, but he really brought this method into making. And it works exceptionally well. It may absolutely result in the best running turnouts that you can make with it. And by staging it, this is exactly what I'm doing. However, they're hard to detail. But they're exceptionally inexpensive to build. They're pretty doggone easy. They work flawlessly. The method's been around for a long time, and people have done it a few different ways. But soldering to PC board ties is a very real consideration for anybody here. You can build any of the little tricky things, and it's just board ties. How much is more rigid than soldered?
Well, we have a question here, Andy, from Dwight Chrisman. That how are you doing like an insulated frog type turnout by hand laying?
So I cut you either cut the rails after the fact, or I cut them before as I build them. And actually, I kind of go over the top with that a little bit. I don't use rail joiners. I insulate every rail connection, and I run feeders to every rail. Again, I'm over the top a little bit. I run 2 feeders to every rail, one on each side. That way, if I ever want to go back and put an isolation in the middle, my rail would be fed from both sides. But the reason that I isolate every single rail has much more to do with signaling and electronics than anything else. I'm putting speakers under my track, and I'm using the isolation of each rail to be able to detect occupancy, to be able to power to be able to trigger speakers that are under the track for wheel squeal and flange noises. That's not necessary. But I isolate the rail. Depending on the method that you choose to build your track work with, you may want to just build your track work all the way through and then come back and cut it A lot of people do it with a Dremel. I don't like a Dremel because it puts a slight angle on it. And then when they expand, they can push up at an angle. I use a jeweler saw. It cuts a really, really fine line. Um, Actually, it cuts the exact thickness of a 88 cent for sale sun. And then I shove a little bitty old sliver of that stuff down in that gap. Just to keep expansion.
Do you glue that into the gap?
What?
You glue the plastic into the gap after you cut it, or you just...
No, I put styrene in the gap. That way, if the rails expand, they don't make contact. If they expand, contact. I've tried a few other things too. I've tried liquid tape. Um, I've been experimenting with liquid tape, but I'm not sure if enough expansion won't cause that to get forced out of the gap. So I'm still...
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
I'm also trying. I've also used epoxy on a couple of them, and I'm gonna go back and look at them. You know, if it don't work, I'll cut it out, stick a piece of styrene in there. But
Yeah.
I also put some epoxy on some of them, and then filed the epoxy smooth. My curiosity is, if they expand and contract a lot over a few years, will that epoxy get brittle and break out?
Yeah, it might break the glue joint. Yeah.
Yeah. So styrene works unquestionably, and for rail alignment, I glue. That's the next method that I'm getting ready to talk about is gluing. I don't spike, not much. I spike a little bit. I spike in curves some. I spike around turnouts some, especially where the points begin their divergent, where they can move. I spike there to add some, because there's a lot of movement. Eventually, break the glue loose. I spike there. I spike the frog because there's a lot of things expanding and contracting against the frog in different directions.
Right.
So I spike my frog down. That's a problem I always have with commercial turnouts too, is the frog kind of pops up. A lot of times people have to go back to file them down. Everything's expanding and contracting, and all the pressure of all the bent metal of the rails that are bent to and from, that all kind of takes an effect on the frog. And the frog tends to pop up on one side or the other. I've had to file down many frogs. However, in the last few decades, so spiking and soldering are great methods. I'm going to be doing some of both. I spike some on my layout as I need to, and I'm absolutely going to be using the PC board ties.
Now, where would you use them at?
Huh?
Where would you be, other than turnouts, where would you use the PC board ties at?
There are some advantages to doing like a helix with them, because when you make a curve that's rigid, it's rigid. So what I'm thinking about doing is laying flex track. I'm thinking about it. I haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking about laying flex track through my helix and cutting a few of the ties out every 6-8 inches and soldering a PC board tie in there to make sure that expansion and contraction doesn't cause a stupid, kind of bow in the track to pop out.
Right. That's probably not a bad idea. Yeah.
I mean, flex track's cheap, so I'm not ridiculous. I'm not going to hand lay all my track, the stuff that's not visible, my staging guards and helix. I'm gonna use flex track. The stuff's cheap.
Yeah.
And it's actually turnouts that make building a layout expensive. If it wasn't for turnouts, it wouldn't be so expensive to build a layout. They're just expensive. So the next method, the next two methods, use glue as an adhesive. So Central Valley makes a product. They're plastic ties, just like what your flex track would be, and they make tie strips that you can use out on the layout. But they also make turnout kits for 5, 7, 9. It's kind of odd that they make odd numbers, but they make turnout kits, and they're just plastic, plastic ties, and they have a little clip designed into them. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but you can almost set your rail in there, push the clips over it, and the rail will stay. But most people who use them glue with contact cement. So, and in the last few decades, the technology around adhesives, it has advanced tremendously. I mean, we've got the sirented adhesives, or CAs, that we all know and love, but there's a lot of contact adhesives that have been invented and created. The contact technology has got a lot better. That's what's used to apply your iPhone screen to the touch part. It's glued together. That technology in glue has advanced tremendously, and that's what I use to lay my track. And what's this last picture? Oh, it's irrelevant. So I build. Oh, come on, quit that. There you go. There we are. I build my track in pseudo sections. So most of my sections are much longer, 6, 8 feet long. So I can take them off the layout and build them and work on them. This section just has a fairly tight curve in it, goes back through a gap in the mountains, and it needed to be a separate piece. It's all hand laid. It is got a spike on this thing, and I could, this thing weighs a little bit with the homosote and everything being there, and it'll easily can be held by the rail. It weighs a few pounds. It's rigid. There's not a spike on that. It's just glue. Now there's detail parts. We'll talk about that in a second, but all it is contact cement. The contact cement on the ties, contact cement on the rail. Give it about 15 minutes to kind of set up and tack up and set your rail in place. Take a soldering iron with a flat blade on it and heat it up for a few seconds. Move down 2 or 3 inches. Move down 2 or 3 inches. It sets the glue up and it becomes rock solid. This won't go anywhere. Now, the Central Valley kits are exceptional if you're using flex track and want your detail to be similar. You can still build your turnouts on plastic ties, having the bolt plates and the detail parts that you miss by hand laying track a lot of times. That was something I always hated. The argument always was hand lay track works better and in some ways looks better because the wood ties look so good, but you're missing the detail parts. You're missing bolt plates and all that other stuff. So the fourth method is also adhering with glue, but I come across a company, Proto 87 stores, or proto87.com, and they make a number of detail parts. They make these strips of tie plates. They come in a really shiny silver, and I acid etch them. Some people do this till they're black, but I have a kind of a time and a process of aerating the acid to where it gives this kind of rusty brown color. It gives a kind of rusty brown color. Hard to see, I guess, but it's not black, it's rusty brown. But you can do that by using an acid etch, like a blackening chemical, and not leaving it in for very long. And as soon as it starts to blacken, push air through a straw so that it's getting oxygen to it. It will reduce the effectiveness of the blackening agent, and it will come out like this. Don't suck on the straw, by the way. That stuff's toxic as it can be. You know, the funniest thing is, all the hobbies that I've been interested in, and model railroading is the most dangerous thing that I do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I've got every kind of thinner and MEK thinner. That's one of my favorites here lately. I really like working with MEK. I'm using it as a plastics adhesive anymore, but it's a carcinogen and it causes cancer. So auto railroading gave me cancer. No, the gloves are your friend.
Oh yeah.
And then I made up some of that the steel wool and vinegar for making rust, for making stain. And I found as a byproduct that if I pull the steel wool out early and run it through a screen, I can get powdered rust. So I use chalk to color a lot of things. I use powdered rust to color some of them too. And that looks like a biohazard all on its own.
Oh yeah, that stuff is probably rather toxic when you get done soaking it in there.
There's a lot of these things that are just doggone toxic. I mean, these acid etching chemicals, and there's just a lot of the stuff that's toxic. It's, if you start working with some of this stuff. I hand lay a track. I thin the contact cement with MEK to make a thinner paste that I can easily apply. Some people run it through a needle. I've tried that. It's not my favorite method. It's what the guys on Proto 87 stores do. I like these little micro brushes better.
Oh, those things are great.
Absolutely. And 100 of them for $2.99 on eBay.
Yeah. So what kind of actual contact cement do you use? Is it a particular brand or something?
Now, I use Okay, I use DAP because it's available.
Oh,
It's just available. You know, I can go to Walmart and buy it. The guys at Proto 87 Parts that I ordered the parts from, they recommend using a contact cement that's often used in shoe repair called barge cement.
so
Really,
that's a contact cement. Okay.
and I haven't found a good way to get it without paying a lot of shipping. So I started out saying, well, I'll just go ahead and build a few pieces of track and see if the regular contact cement works okay. Worked fine. I've went ahead and laid quite a few more feet of track, and trains are running over it without any problem. So it works. So I use the detail parts. I use bolt plates. I use bolt plates and fish plates, and I got a whole little drawer of detail parts
Wow.
that track. Um, there is an individual bolt plate on each tie, or an individual tie plate on each tie. There is the rail is scored over 39 feet, and on each side, inside and out, there's a bolt plate. On this piece of track, this is 36 inches long, there's 522 parts.
Whoa.
Counting 2 rails and 24 bolt plates, 120 ties, and 240 bolt plates. So ties, bolt plates, 120 ties, 240 bolt plates, you're at 360 parts before you've ever stuck rail on it. And then rail, and then tie plates, all that other stuff. There's maybe it was 502. There's 502 parts in this slightly longer than 36-inch piece. But
I mean, you're going to go and talk a little bit about what the whole process is there, because obviously that's a lot of moving pieces to nail down.
it is a lot of parts. I do it in a few steps. So I had to invent some techniques to work for me. I build the ties basically with the tie plates, and I don't want to completely focus on this one method because I'll tell anybody that's talking about hand laid track, the way I build mine is not for the faint of heart. And there's nothing wrong with a lot of the other techniques that are out there. You can get very, very good looking, and most importantly, very, very, very good performing track and not go down this rabbit hole. So I use a little jig, and my ties set down in this jig, and the ties set down in this jig, and this little template goes over top, and you put drops of glue and slide the tie plates in place. So what I do is I set it up, and I set my tie plates on there with well, my favorite tool is a dental pick.
Okay, right.
So I use a few different tools for it. I mean, I got more money in tweezers and stuff like that than anything else. But where is that back? There it is. This is. If I lost this one, I'd sit down and cry about it. This little pick with this weird angle, and I've got all kinds of picks, various tools. But this little pick with this little angle on it, I can pick the tie plate up, set them in place, and then I align them, and then I run down through there with. I glue the tie plates to the ties with just CA, thick, slow set CA. So I put just a little dab on each one, and then I slide the tie plates out on each one and get them in alignment. Now here's the part I had to invent. So when I can't glue all the ties down and sand them to get them smooth, but I want them to be tied up against the bottom of the rail, which means I need to lay the rail to the tie with the contact cement and let it pick the tie up, so the ties kind of have to float. So what I've done is I use tape, double-sided tape. It's super thin. It's like transfer tape, but in this case, it's double-sided fabric double-sided fabric tape.
Oh, okay.
Peel and stick fabric tape. It's super thin, and I build up bunches of these things when I have time. I'll sit down and I built up 20 of these over the holiday. I took a bunch of ties home with me, and this little jig I sat and just made these when I had, when I couldn't sleep or something. Because sitting down with the glue and putting tie plates on is a little more involved, but I could make these little strips up like it's nothing.
Well, where did you get those templates at the jigs?
Just making these, and then once I get tie plates on them, like this little strip here has the tie plates on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see them.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but this just a little piece I had left over where I cut it off and then going into a turnout. Um, this has them on it. What I do after I get tie plates on them is I rip the back off the tape and I adhere them to the homosoap. So I have big old long strips of ties adhered to the homosoap with this adhesive. Now it's relatively strong, but I can shift the ties around from side to side to get alignment right as I need to. Shouldn't have to much, but get alignment right. Uh, and as I push the rail into the tie and adhere it by using the soldering iron to cure the glue, if it happens that one of the ties is a little thinner or a little lower, the glue sets, it'll pick that tie up just a little bit. And then when I come back with ballast and adhere it all down, everything's solid and the ties are up tight against the bottom of the rail. That's all that matters.
Now, the jig that you use to put the ties in and the template for putting in the tie plates, where did you get those at?
Uh, Proto87stores.com is where I buy the tie plates from.
Oh, okay.
There's a few places that actually have them though. So they've been around for a long time from a few companies. Detail West used to make them in HO scale. They make them now, not anymore in HO scale. They do make the bolt plates or the fish plates or the rail jointed plates.
Right.
But they don't make them in the tie plates in HO scale anymore. There's another company that I should remember the name of. I used to use them all the time. Kimball or Kimber, that made detail parts 30 years ago.
Oh, okay.
They still make them, or you can still get those. But I like these really well, but also Monster Model Works. I mean, they're an exceptional company. They also make these little laser cut bolt plates. They're awesome.
Oh, that's right, they do, don't they?
Yeah, he makes them too, and especially for just buying them and staining them and stacking them up as a detail on the side, just buy a pack from him. But these have the benefit of they have a little trough for the rail to set in, so when I put these on the ties, I don't even gauge my track when I'm laying it. All I do is lay the glue, lay the rails into the troughs. They're perfectly engaged.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, it actually makes putting the ties on the tie plate is a slow process. After that, laying the rail, that takes a few minutes.
You just go down with a glue applicator and slap some rail down, right?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So glue is absolutely, I mean, I would suggest that a person consider using glue no matter how they're doing it, using contact cement.
Now, when you put the rail down, do you do anything to cure the glue? Like you do with the tie
I use
plates?
a soldering iron.
Really?
I
Okay.
use a soldering iron to heat it up. I don't do anything to cure the CA, and I use this super slow set stuff. This is my favorite thing, this Loctite extra time control.
Oh, okay.
This is great. I mean, Gorilla makes a good super glue too, but that extra time control Loctite is exceptional.
Gives you a little more working time compared to the other glues?
Yeah, it's got it's probably more like, okay, so this is, the Gorilla Thin Glue is like a 5 or 6 second that time. Loctite's gel glue is more like 20-25 seconds. The extra time control could give you closer to a minute. It's got a pretty good working time.
Oh, wow.
And it's a pretty rigid glue, and it's relatively thick. It goes where you want it to.
Right.
The thin glue kind of gets all over everything. But I would consider that using glue no matter what method. If all you wanted to do was lay ties and lay rail across the ties, put contact cement on the bottom of your rails. And, and spike it a little bit. But you could spike a tremendously lot less by using contact cement, or not spike at all.
Yeah, but you could probably even do it like every fourth tie or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the standard used to be every 5 or 6. That's what we used to do years ago at the clubs.
Oh, okay.
I like the idea of spiking an odd number so that you can come back and spike the number between them if you wanted.
Right. Okay.
If you spike every 5, then you can come back and spike every 6 or something. You can come back and spike every 3, basically.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
But and a lot of people like the idea of spiking every tie. It looks a little more realistic. Still missing the bolt plates, but it looks more realistic to spike every tie. And
Right.
there's some great ways to do that. Um, Miles Hale on his Trademasters TV about head laying track on his his video on Trademasters TV about head laying track. He showed off his use of a KD spiker. Those things are awesome. KD used to make them back in the 70s. They have been gone since the Pinto.
Yeah.
You can still buy them on eBay because Jimmy, our buddy Jimmy in Michigan,
Oh,
had
okay.
one. He was thinking about headland track, and he bought one on eBay. Got a pretty good deal on it. So they're still around. You can still buy the spikes for it. Still buy the rebuild kits and parts for them.
Oh, wow.
They're absolutely worth considering. If you're going to hand lay rail to tie with spikes, KD Spiker is a great tool.
I'm surprised someone else hasn't come out with a tool like that.
Yeah, hand laying had pretty much went by the wayside until seriously until Fast Tracks and Tim Morris with Fast Tracks came out with his method of soldering and these jigs, the turnout jigs that you lay everything in,
Right, yeah.
tack a few solder, lift a turnout out of it in a few seconds.
Yeah.
He has revolutionized, or he has brought back hand laying track.
Oh, you're right. I mean, I know a lot of people like you that want to get into this, and I'm thinking, I'm going to at least try it myself to see which methods I might like,
Well, that's the Fast Tracks method is lock, solid, easy, proven.
Yep.
It just works. It's a great method. I don't have, like I said, in my hidden areas, that's absolutely what I'm going to use. And when I first designed this layout, I started the idea of building a layout again after a number of years of not having one. I was convinced that I knew I was going to hand lay track, but I started seeing his work, and I was, yes, that's the way to do that. I'm going to totally do that. And then I found these detail parts and fell in love with them. So, I'm interested in using all the various detail parts that make up, for example, screen share, like this turnout that I showed you to begin with. Those are all the detail parts that I will be using around the turnout. These are the proper throw bars and the hook tie plates with the bracing on them.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so they have a little tie plate with a hook on it and then a brace that fits in there. And that's everywhere the points meet the closure rail. And then along the points is a piece of rail, but along the points you use a bolt plate. It has detail parts, the bolt details on it. And then you use these skid tie plates under the bolt. Actually, I can find I don't see one, but there's all these detail parts around the frog, and there's just a tremendous lot of detail parts. There's a lot of different parts on a turnout, and in my opinion, they're what make a turnout really interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, all these on the sides of the frog, all the bolts and all those details. I am fascinated by looking at that level of detail, and you cannot in any way get that with a commercial turnout. You can add some detail parts. Who is it? There's a Detail West, actually. Yeah, Detail West makes a turnout detail part kit. Maybe it's Micro Engineering that makes it. Somebody makes a detail parts turnout kit, and they have the additional details that go against your guardrails and against the frog and all that stuff. It's not feature complete, but it's close. So
I think that is Details West. I think you're right.
Yeah, I was thinking it was. And it's just a kit. It's meant to detail a turnout. I have to find one of these turnouts that's fully detailed, but it's still not everything that a person can do. But you can do that stuff, and I thought that was impossible. Years ago, I thought it would be impossible to get this level of detail. And it seems like it's difficult. When I tell you, like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. When I tell you there's 500 pieces or parts in that 3-foot section, most people are like, yeah, I'm not doing that. But honestly, this is the worst that it could be, number of detail parts, and it's not that bad.
It really does. I mean, it really does add to quality and the look of the track work. I mean, I understand why people do it.
I mean, if you're obsessed with the super detail and you want to go as far as I'm talking about here with all these detail parts,
Yeah.
I get a lot of gratification from it. I'm not scratch building my locomotives or anything, so I can spend my time building track.
Right.
It's all about where you want to spend your time. That's and or money for that matter. When it comes to building a railroad, none of us or none of the guys that I talk to and hang out on here with have unlimited time or money.
All right, you're right.
And you have to focus. And you can buy locomotives and rolling stock that are second to none, that have separate grab irons and look beautiful. And it's not even difficult to achieve or to get a hold of, and not even necessarily expensive. And people like to complain about the cost of the hobby, but man, there's some really nice looking stuff out there these days. You don't have to buy brass.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually was considering buying a Broadway Limited L1, right? Now I found all these problems with the decoder, where now I spend $375 an engine. I get to rip it out and put $100 decoder in it.
Yeah.
So I said, for $375, I can go buy like a decent United or Railworks L1 and spend the same amount of money or less, and
Yep.
put a decoder in it myself and have a really great engine. So I understand that there is a trade-off between your level of detail and how much you want to spend on things.
And cost and time is the two big things we have to play out all the time. I started out thinking I'm gonna scratch build every building on here, and I don't have time. There's just not enough time.
I'll tell you, you always go down the old adage.
And there's
Good, fast, and cheap pick too. Yeah.
That are not that expensive, and they look great. And for $20 you can buy a laser cut, little house, and they look great. They look fine.
Yeah.
So
they're pretty quick and easy to assemble. So.
I'm not real happy with plastic in general. Part of the reason that I like hand-laid track is the wood ties. I can really dig those things up. I use a little jig out of tape.
All right.
Lay all my ties down. Now a lot of people stain their ties. They take them out of the bag, throw them in a jar. I got one back here, but a jar of India ink or something.
Right.
I don't stain with India ink. I do a lot with India ink. I really like India ink, but it doesn't hold up on wood ties over the long haul. If you have a layout for 8 or 10 years, they will change color, and I don't like that. So I use Minwax oil stains. They take a long time to dry, several days, but they will be color. But they'll be the same color in 20 years.
But see, I'm leaning towards using like a Hunterline alcohol stains on things. I've been using that in some wood projects, and they seem to work pretty nice. I don't know how they would be on hold up on ties though, but people use them on bridge kits all the time.
Now I use stain on my laser kits. I mean, I use India ink on everything pretty much. I will put a base coat of India ink stain on every wood kit I do, so that if I scratch off the paint or anything, there's a weathered wood underneath.
Right.
I use a lot of brown India inks. I do all my plastic rock castings with it.
I got you. Yeah.
I stain static grass with green India ink.
Do you really?
I've had better luck with that than acrylics. So I will take India ink almost straight and not hardly dry brush, but not a very thick brush, and I'll run across the tops of my applied static grass to change the colors.
Okay, I got you.
I use India ink for all kinds of stuff, but for ties it hasn't worked for me. And a lot of people just throw their ties in a vat of India ink and stain them. I take a tool to mine. So I used to lay my ties down and take a welding brush to them.
Yeah.
Bar them up. And that works okay. But that bad boy does a lot better. So I take a wire brush to them, and I tear them up pretty good. I mean, I hit every one of them a little bit. Ties are really smooth, so I distress the ties and give some texture to them. And then I dig spots out in them. And then I take a dull X-Acto and cut a large portion of them, maybe most of them.
Right.
Go look at a brand new tie that has just been put in. It will be almost black, but it will have already have some cracks in it. Brand new, straight off the trailer, already be cracked. So I use an X-Acto for that. I also simulate the rotting effect, where the ties seem to be rotting they rot from the inside.
Inside, yeah.
Yep. So what I do is take and dig out the back of the tie with a sharp needle file.
Oh, like the underneath side?
Yeah, on the back side, and dig the back side of it out real thin, and then poke it through, and then knock off the stuff on the surface of it, and it looks like it rotted through it did rot through from the outside, but instead of rot, Andy got to it. So,
you ever tried using a file card to distress them?
Yeah, I'm sure. I know I've done that. I don't remember. I've done that before.
That works out. I don't know how well it would work, and that to achieve the effects you want. But I mean, for small quantities of wood, it's pretty easy to use a file card to tear it up.
Man, I've used every kind of tool in the world. Headlight track, and I've done, like I said, I've done it for a long time in a lot of different ways, and I've used every tool imaginable. And I've talked to people a bunch of times about different methods. I'm like, yeah, I remember when I used to do it that way. I forgot that I'd done it that way. I mean, we used to build turnouts with rail and a file. That was it.
Yeah, well, that's until Tim came out with his jigs.
Yeah, you just sat down, lay a couple of rails roughly in place, file on them until they made a point, and then.
Now, do you use the metal templates or do you use like the paper template?
I use paper templates a lot. I don't use jigs, not for turnouts. I just use paper templates. I use it for putting my my ties and my tie plates on. But
so you just use the point and frog tool then to make your points and frogs with?
Now, okay, I used to build my frogs. And I used to build my points, but I don't anymore. I buy them cast.
Oh, okay.
I think they work better. And, I mean, okay, and it's easier. They have more detail on them. They look better. And they work as well, if not better. And it's just easy and fast. I haven't found a disadvantage to use them. They're better. They work better. They look better. So I use cast frogs. I use to file them all the time. But I use cast frogs, cast manganese frogs. At the moment, I am not powering them. I am, while I'm installing them, running a feeder wire to it, dropping it below the roadbed.
Right.
So if I ever regret this decision, it's pretty go back to some frog juicer on it. But my thinking has been that it was better or cheaper and much more advantageous to put current keepers in all my locomotives.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to put current keepers in all my locomotives right now. Now, as I get more equipment, that might not be true, but it's much cheaper to do that than it is to put a frog juicer on every turnout. And I get all the added benefits. And then you get all the added benefits of having a current keeper. They work better.
Exactly.
Much lazier about cleaning track. I love that idea.
Yeah. Now, the cast frog stuff you buy, are you buying them through Fast Tracks or through Proto 87?
Proto 87 has those cast. There's a few people that have them, though. Microengineering sells cast frogs and points as well, or cast frogs. I buy them from Proto 87 stores because they've got them there.
Right.
And they have multiple styles so that I can get those that meet my 1950s era layout.
Right, I got you, right. Okay.
And that stuff has changed. If you model a modern railroad, especially a modern Class 1 railroad that's redone track work recently, there are new technologies like self-guarding frogs that don't have guardrails on the opposing.
Oh, wow.
A recent thing. But I'm on 1950, and that means that there are certain detail parts that are relevant for my era. So nowadays, all bolt plates everywhere, what used to be called heavy duty, have 8 bolt holes in them. They're big and wide. They have 8 bolt holes. That was mainlines in 1930 had 4 bolt hole plates. That's all they had. So on my layout, which is set in 1950, I am considering backdating a little bit, but right now, as the newest mainline sections have 8 hole bolt plates. I have sidings, and this little piece that I showed you here a second ago, it's only using 4 bolt hole bolt plates,
Gotcha.
which
Right.
makes these much harder to see and much smaller than, say, these that are on here. These are much larger plates.
Hmm. Well, all those details really, I mean, I've seen your track work, and it just definitely brings it up to a whole different level, compared to just normal hand laid track that everybody's always known.
But
And
you can't. So a couple points on that. Number one, the people who say you can't see it are,
oh
oh,
yeah, they're wrong. I mean, I can see it.
you can see it, and you're looking at it through a cheap camera. Here in person, it's gorgeous.
Oh
Actually,
yeah.
when I first started, I bought all these parts and started playing with them, and I said, man, this is really time consuming, and so I'm gonna finish this one piece up and just look at it and see how it looks before I make my decision to go on down this rabbit hole.
Sure. Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
I completed this first section, I just fell in love with it, and I have to do it now.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do all that to have really good looking track work. I mean, the fact, if you'll take the ties and take wood ties and stain them and take some tools to them to weather them and make them look good, rail made with wood ties looks gorgeous.
Oh yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that too. And I
And the
know
detail parts are just a
I'm
plus.
looking to do some S scale modules just for like a narrow gauge, so 2 foot. And I know a guy that sells tie strips that are main 2 foot specific.
Yep.
So they're 8 foot wide, but they're 4x6 ties instead of 4x8 ties.
Yep.
So they're even marked for spiking. So it's a lot easier for me to go and do that. But that's big enough for me that I might invest the effort, because I'm only building a couple modules and putting the detail in. So I have to see how it goes.
Oh
So
yes.
I might do that as an experiment. If I like it enough, maybe it'll end up in my HO layout. But I haven't decided whether I'm hand laying track or what brand I'm even buying. So maybe I'll buy the microengineering tie strips and rail,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
So,
I'm not against flex track. You can make flex track look pretty good. I'm not an artist.
right.
I'm an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I'm a computer engineer by day job. Everything. I started out going to school for architecture. I'm an engineer through and through.
Yeah.
I can lay track and just precision track work. I have been able to do that since I was a young fella. But scenery and artistry and even building structures was always so scary or daunting to me.
Yeah. I understand where
I
you're coming from.
I can't make plastic look like anything other than plastic. So I just can't make flex track look good. And wood ties that are representative of real wood ties, I can make look good.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I've the last few years that I've been going to like the fine scale shows and stuff, I'm really gravitating towards doing that kind of stuff. And every now and then the thought runs to my head, go in the garage, get all the Walther kits, put them on eBay and buy new stuff. But I've also learned some techniques that you can use in plastic kits to really hide the fact that they're plastic kits. But so I don't know. I think it's just because of the style I want to model or what I'm modeling. I can't really necessarily go and get replacement Craftsman style kits, wood kits. Some stuff I can, so I will cherry pick what I do. But trust me, if you start going to some of these clinics at like expos, like fine scale expo and stuff, you can get over your fear, because trust me, I looked at that stuff like, yeah, right, I'll never do it. Now I feel more confident. I'm not there yet, but
Yeah.
I feel much more confident in doing it. So
I'm gaining in confidence as well. And part of the way I designed my construction methodology on this layout was to force my hand, to get me doing scenery earlier in the process and building buildings earlier in the process. And while I only have a small section of track that I've been laying, because it takes me a long time to do it, I've already built 100 or a couple hundred trees. I've already built a mountain and fully landscaped that. I've built several kits that I'm quite proud of, wood structure kits. And I'm not talking about the expensive stuff. These are not fine scale miniatures or
no, yeah.
And they're gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. Fine Scale Miniatures and some of those companies that build those kits build exceptional kits that are worth every penny. But I've been buying $20 and $30 and $40,
like bar mills and stuff.
Little wood light. I mean, these are $40, $50 kits.
Yeah.
And
that looks really nice.
Actually, let me show you this one. I just finished this one. And a lot of people design layouts in different ways. I know CAD's real popular. Like I told you, I started out in architecture, and I did design my layout in CAD kind of originally, but I did a lot of my layout one-to-one on brown paper.
Yeah.
And for that, I somewhat need buildings because I like visualizing how it's going to be done. So I had interlocking that I needed to complete. This was $22.
Wow. I mean, who made that kit?
This is American Model Builders.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know that.
They're dirt cheap, man. I really like them, and I really like Laser Art Structures from Branch Line Trains.
Yeah, they're really nice too. Yeah.
This is a $20 or $30 kit. If you want to, do things like open windows and stuff, you've got to do a little cutting on it. Anyway, there's some work to be done to make these look as good as they do. But, this is a good-looking kit for next to nothing. I mean, dirt cheap. And this is a very important kit on a section of my layout. I left the top off. I'm buying the interlocking plant. The arms.
And that's no more expensive than the plastic version from Walters. Their interlocking tower.
Yep. And it looks great for me. I'm better with wood, and it looks good for me. I've done some plastic work. Used to. My layouts years ago. They were all built on plywood mostly. A whole lot of the time they didn't get a lot further than plywood ripped and popped up with some risers. And even when I first started hand laying, I was spiking into cork. So I'd pull the flex track up where I'd done that, and I would build turnouts and spike them into cork. And my layouts never got much further than that. And I'd put a few plastic kits on them and run trains. And I didn't want to do that this time. So I forced my hand into doing things that I'm not comfortable doing early in the process.
Well, that's how we learn, and I've done the same thing.
And my confidence levels went up. I now feel pretty good about building trees and, some of that stuff. The track work, the actual construction of the track work, the getting the lines and making it perform well and providing electricity to it the right way for DCC, that's trivial. I do that myself. Yeah. But getting all the detail right and the artistry involved in it, that took some. It took some.
Yeah. Well, I think you've really done a fantastic job with it. I've seen your work, and it's quite beautiful. And if you have a 40, 50 foot layout, I don't know that you could achieve that to that level. But if you have a small enough layout, I think it's probably worth the effort to do those kind of details, especially in certain areas. Like obviously, you don't need to do it in hidden staging.
That's an important thing to take into account, is what you choose to do on one part of your layout doesn't have to be the same all over. I would strongly encourage people to consider focusing on little areas that are close to the front of their layout and super detailing the heck out of them, and not so much further away. Now my layout is only 15 by 15 feet. It's only a single deck right now, but the plan is to have 4. My layout will be much bigger. These are sectional modules. They are by no means portable, but they are movable.
Yes.
And we have the blueprints for the new house that we're building. We're probably about 4 or 5 years away from building that. But the new house, and it's 44 by 70 feet, and we'll have a full basement under it. So
there you go.
That's a big room. Now, I will not have a double deck layout when I have that much space.
There'd be no reason to do that.
I am doing multi-deck here, and I'm a huge fan of multi-deck layouts when you don't have a lot of space. When you have a lot of space, no way.
The other thing where you could do that is, like you said, bring it up. So you have bring it up chest high or eye level.
Eye level's what I do.
Yeah, so I
And
mean,
that's
that
what
would look nice.
the detail. It's all about your layout. If your track work is far away from you, or much lower, or whatever, every layout's different, and whether you hand lay any track at all, or whether you hand lay turnouts only, or how you choose to do it, is going to be totally contingent on your layout. There is no right answer. You don't
Yes.
buy Cato locomotives and run them on microengineering track and for everybody. There is no one size fits all.
No.
All of our layouts are heavily customized. And what I really want people to consider, hand laying track at least in portions of their layout, or at least for some turnouts, because it's not that hard to do.
I think some of the best bang you'll get is turnouts.
Yeah, turnouts for sure. It's not necessary anywhere else, really. Now, if you're a narrow gauger, if you're doing narrow gauge, man, you really ought to look at hand laying. It really pops.
I know Mike has done some hand lay track, and he has some fast track jigs for narrow gauge, and he did a small shelf, like a time saver type setup, and it looked really nice that way,
Or if you have modules, if you're building a couple 4, 6, 8 foot long modules,
yeah,
lay all that track and detail it to the nines.
Yeah, because especially the one module I'm planning, a good portion of the railroad's going to be on trestles over a river. So that would lend me to an umpty amount of detail, it's like nut bolt washers, the tie plates, all that stuff. So that's something I have to plan out, but I think I'll definitely work on it there, even though it's in a bigger scale. But then the techniques I can use down in HO scale at some point too.
Oh, I really wanted to go to a larger scale. We and I got out of the hobby when I was in my early 20s, and got out of the hobby. I was in service, and I realized I was just never be able to build the kind of layout I wanted. And at the time, I had sold all my HO scale equipment off and started buying O scale 2 rail. I love it. Absolutely love O scale 2 rail. Really, really, really love Proto 48.
Yeah.
Proto scale. I really wish I could do that, but it's just.
That's why what I'm going to do for S narrow gauge is going to be like maybe 4 modules just to take the shows. I'm going to probably keep them. I have to keep them short enough to fit in my car, unless when I get around to them, if I buy another car, I'm going to buy something to a trail with, and I can get like 6-foot modules to do something. And my goal was to maybe just go around with the SN2 crew and do Wiscasset, Maine with 2-foot narrow gauge.
Yep.
So that's a long-term plan.
But I love like the Sandy River, Wrangley Lakes.
Yep.
I've looked at some pictures of that stuff, and I'm fascinated by it. And I've said to some other people on, talking on the chats on here, some of the narrow gauge guys, that I model Class 1 standard gauge railroading in the 50s, but I have for years I've called it, I am very narrow gauge curious.
Hang out with me and Mike, and you'll turn into a narrow gauge guy.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody who does. I love steam. Something about steam power has always done it for me. And since I first rode behind the Norfolk and Western Class J, the 611, I rode behind that bad boy, walked alongside of it, and fell in love with steam power when I was young. And anybody that likes steam power has to fall in love with a few certain things, and narrow gauge is one of those things. They just the mechanization and it all right out there in front of you is true on any steam locomotive, but it's very, very pronounced on narrow gauge.
Well, I'll tell you what, if on narrow gauge, if you want to go main 2-footers, the railroad to model is the Sandy River Wrangley Lakes, because there's so much, not a ton, but there's a lot more commercial product available from like Portland Locomotive Works and stuff like that, and that they do a lot of kits in O and S scale, and even HO. So, but mine, I'm picking SN2 with the Wiscasset. A lot less out there, so it's more buy the plans, find the plans, scratch build. So I figure if I'm going to do all that, I might as well hand lay the track too and make it look that way. So.
If you as a modeler have a desire to reach anywhere close to what's called fine scale, you're going to scratch build some stuff. And I would consider what I do. Some people say that what I'm doing is closer to Proto 87, but I don't adhere to Proto 87 standards. I do use some Proto 88 parts. I use semi-scale wheel sets, I haven't had good luck out of Proto 87. Their flangeways and all that stuff are just way too delicate. They look great on a diorama, but in an operational railroad, they don't hold up. So I use Proto 87 semi-scale. But I would definitely consider my efforts to be an attempt at fine-scale modeling throughout the layout, in every part of the layout that is fine-scale.
Yeah, well, I can agree with you on that. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. I'm going to go and go over the topic of the night and the YouTube Model Builders resources here. So,
Yep.
Get my screen share going here. There we go. That was out. Bingo. So just remember, tonight, folks, you're on the YouTube Model Builders Hangouts, and you're watching the Geno show. Tonight, Geno's sick, so I'm filling in his stead. We have our guest, Andy Crawford, discussing the finer aspects of hand-laying track, hand-laying turnouts. And don't forget to visit the YouTube Model Builders for your source for free model railroad information. And we have our free online e-magazine, which you can subscribe to get notified when it's available, and other things will be coming to the subscriptions in the future. Then we have our live chat presentations on the Hangouts Tuesdays and Thursdays. And once a month we have the live show with Big Bill, Graham, and myself. And we have the YouTube Model Builders website at www.youtubemodelbuilders.com. All right. So it's been a rather interesting evening so far, discussing stuff with you, Andy, and I greatly appreciate all the information you've provided here. I mean, it's a lot of input for people, and like I said, there's levels of hand laying that you can get into, all the way up to including the fine scale work that you're doing.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about the fine scale stuff, and I really wanted to try to be as more encouraging to some of the other techniques that may not be fine scales from some of the detail parts perspective. And we've talked a lot about the detail and the look and the fine scale nature of getting them to look as meticulous as they are. Right. But you can do a lot of that with commercial track. You can get it looking very, very good. The biggest advantage to hand laying track, in my opinion, is performance. With properly weighted cars that are properly engaged with, if you do the work on your cars that you should do anyway, you will not have a derailment that's not human error. Period. Should not happen. And we haven't really talked as much about that performance or whatever. And also, this is a hangout. I'd love to have a few more people. I really prefer the hangouts when we have a few more people that talk about a few different ideas. And I love it.
Oh, sure.
Here that don't agree. That's my favorite hangouts. Is when people that don't agree.
Well, that's because you get the different viewpoints, and we all know there's 50 ways to skin every cat in this hobby, So.
And I have all the respect in the world for these people that I don't necessarily agree with. And one of the things is, I can sit down with some of the guys that I sometimes disagree on hangouts with, and we would agree on 99% of things. Surely, we would all agree that building a railroad should be done. That you should build a good foundation, and that
right.
Spend the time getting the electronics right. And there's so many things we would agree on.
Sure.
But the things that make us that are interesting are the things that we disagree on. And it's not that I don't think that their way is fine and will produce a good result, but I like my way.
I totally agree with you there, Eddie, because it's just so many ways to do it, and sometimes there's that little difference, Just like you said, you can still hand lay track and have a lot of the nice look of it, but without going to the level that you've gone to. But you can also mix them up together, put the stuff with just the wood ties and everything to your background. So there's a lot of ways of doing all of this. And some people disagree and say you got to do it all one way, But I'm an easier guy to get along with in that aspect. That I'll present the different methods and say it's up to you. It's your railroad, your rules. That's always my caveat. And if you want to do what you're doing, enjoy.
Oh, I encourage people, by all means, don't take that's why I wanted to talk about multiple ways of doing this. There's not one answer for everybody.
No, there's not.
What's important to you is being able to build a layout, on a big layout or a reasonably big layout on a budget. Really, really important. And it is to most of us, at least some budget. May be different for different people, but we all have some constraints, and we all want more layout than we could probably ever build or afford.
Yeah.
So if money is a critical factor, then hand laying. You should consider hand laying in some respect. If quality or performance is important to you, and it doggone should be, then you should consider hand laying at least some of it. And if super detailed vine scale is important to you, hand laying fits every little niche of that. But I would have loved to have had a few more people on here to talk about some of the different ideas, because I ramble on for a while, but that is boring for everybody. I know, because I ramble on pretty often. And thanks for suffering through this with me, because I got the flu.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, you've done a pretty good job. You presented a lot of good information, and every now and then I'm pulling a question for you, to get some more information. But here's a question. I mean, if say you decided I wanted to use a commercial track, what, in your opinion, is the best looking commercial track or track system out there, shall we say? I mean, would it be like
on it? It's exceptional. I like everything about it. A lot of people complain about the rigidness of the flex track. I greatly prefer that. You get it right, get the curve right, it stays.
Yeah, it's easier to stay in place. You're right. Yeah.
If you'll take a piece of flex track and just run a marker down it, it will just slowly start bending. Just keep doing that and lay it in place. Keep doing that, or slowly work it, or get it close that way. It will do that. I use microengineering flex track even in the hidden areas because I like the rigidity of it.
Right.
Its spike detail and bolt plate detail is very fine and meticulous, and it looks good.
Now, do you buy it free with the rail already installed, or do you buy the tie plates and separate rail? You can buy it with just the tie strips, right, and then put your own rail in?
Yeah, well, I don't know if microengineering sells just the tie strips. Central Valley does.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Okay.
And
all right.
I absolutely think that's why I mentioned it as one of the recommended methods. If you're looking to hand lay, especially turnouts, so that you can get the performance out of them,
right,
but still have the detail parts without going down this rabbit hole that I did, you can use Central Valley ties to get the detail parts that are on the ties. They have tie plates and little bolt detail, and they look good. If you'll take Central Valley tie plates, glue them down, build your turnout components, or use the cast frogs and cast points, and assemble that, as opposed to hand laying. I think of it more as a construction methodology. If you'll assemble that turnout as opposed to buying it on Central Valley tie plates, and then go back and put the detail kit on it from Details West, you will get especially if you're already using flex track with plastic ties, you will get the same product as what your ties look like, as good as your flex track looks, but with all the performance improvements of a properly tuned turnout.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's the kind of things that I myself have to go through and make those same decisions. So I might buy a few different things. Never handmade a turnout, but Mike has the jig, so I'll probably get some rail, borrow the jigs, and play around with doing that. Because I figure between the two of us, we could buy templates that we need, or decide if we use the paper templates and just buy the form and point tools, and then we'll be doing good.
Yeah, but if you're using a cast frog, which is prototypically more accurate cosmetically, it's so much easier to work with too. But there's nothing wrong with filing frogs. By no means. I've had it for years. It's great.
How expensive are the cast frogs?
$4 or $6, $4.
That's not bad.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The way that I've ultimately chose to build it, with all the detail parts and everything, it's more expensive. It might not be more expensive than a $55 curved Walthers turnout.
Yeah.
But it's more expensive than an Atlas custom line.
Yeah.
But they perform flawlessly, and they're fine scale detail quality, and they're the price of a cheap number 6 turnout.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. That's something I have to consider. I have to get the maybe a couple of those frogs, and then some rail, and then some PC ties. print out some templates and try it out. Can't hurt.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the PC ties. I was absolutely going to do my layout with that until I fell in love with these old tie plates. And even for hidden track, I'm absolutely going to use PC ties, even like I was telling you about with the flex track. But I'm going to be the flex track, but I'm definitely building my turnouts that way. They perform flawlessly. They're not as detailed, but they perform flawlessly.
Yes. Yeah, a friend of mine here is asking me if we're recording this. I'm like, yep. All right. Well, is there anything else you think you'd like to add tonight before we consider whether it's time to close out here? I can't think of anything else off the top of my head to cover at this point.
Now, we kind of covered the 30,000-foot view of multiple methods like I wanted to. We probably went a little deeper than necessary on a method that's not going to be suitable for a lot of people. But I'm on Hangouts pretty often. If anybody wants to talk and laying, I've used every method. I have filed frogs with nothing but sat down in a chair with a file. And I've used PC board ties. I've done a lot of the glue method. They all have a certain application, and I love it.
That might be something. Maybe sit down with Dude and do an actual hands-on presentation of assembling, like, say, a foot-long piece of track to show the whole process you go through.
Yeah, I thought about doing I have taken some short video and a lot of pictures as I went through my construction, because I am going to produce a YouTube video on my construction methodology, because I do a lot of funny things, like it's all styrofoam, no wood, and I have an electronics trough under the track where speakers go, and under my turnouts there's a speaker. So as the turnout triggers from CTC, you get the sound effect of the chink, chink.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to know of even a video for your YouTube channel. Watching you lay a piece of track out, from the very beginning, standing your ties up. That probably would be very useful too. But if you'd be interested in doing something, if you have some of the parts all prepped, just show the assembly process. Talk to Dude. I'm sure we can fit you in somewhere in the Hangout schedule to do something like that.
Well, I have all the pieces basically. I've got strips with ties on them. I got strips without ties on them. I've got ties ready to be worked on. I've got ties up here on the layout there. I mean, I've got it. I'm at every point in the process somewhere. I'm sitting down tonight and cutting tie plates. So I've got pieces and parts in every part of the process at any given time. It's just what I feel like. If I feel like sitting here, I'll do some of this. If I feel like getting up at the layout, sticking rail on, I will.
Well, there you go. Well, yeah, give it some consideration. Even a video, showing different things, photographs and stuff. That would be great.
Yep, I mean to. It takes a long time to produce a YouTube video, but I've been collecting the content for a little while.
Well, look at this here. Our favorite Mancavian leader was laying track tonight watching the show. He was using hands, but not hand laid, he said.
I've seen that.
God love him.
Yep. He's an N-scaler, so they have different criteria, but if I was in N-scale, and I did play with N-scale for a brief period while I was in the military, and then I regained sanity, but I would still hand lay track in N-scale. I would not go for fine scale detail. I would solder to PC board ties, but I would still hand lay turnouts.
Yeah. There's a lot of guys in here like David Layhouse stuff that hand lay N-scale turnouts.
Oh yeah, they work great. Dave Vallejo's, one of the regulars on our Hangouts here, he builds his turnouts. Troy,
Troy did too, yeah.
One of the hosts on the show, he built all his N-scale turnouts before he regained sanity and moved to HO scale. I've done N-scale, so I can pick on N-scale people, but I enjoy picking on them, and I'm sure those scale guys would pick on us little HO scale.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I know guys that like O and guys that like S and G, and it's like.
Yeah, a little bit. The hobby is a good thing, I think. A little.
Oh yeah. Just like when Mike kept saying, "Oh, you gotta do narrow gauge, you gotta do that." Okay. Since you like to do freaky narrow gauge, I said I'm going to out freaky and go SN2. pick just some off the wall scale to work in, and so I think it'll be fun because the main narrow gauge railroads fascinate me, and since I like water and harbor features, the Wiscasset is the perfect railroad for me to model like that. Because when they served the waterfront at Wiscasset, they didn't have like a pier where the railroad ran on the street side. They would go up to the building and load from a trestle on the back side of the building that set over the river.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they would actually pull up their boxcars in the back of like the creamery there, open the doors in the boxcar, open the door in the building, lay a ramp down, and the train sitting over the water on a wood trestle.
Yeah, they did so. That's the fascinating thing about narrow gauges. They did so many creative, unique things, and the Class One mainliners did some really cool stuff too. But it was much more refined. And the narrow gauge guys done some stuff that was not at all refined. Man.
No.
Some crap to the side of the mountain and just hope it worked. And
exactly.
The K-27, one of the most beautiful narrow gauge locomotives, in my opinion, is a full-size locomotive that they stuck on top of a small set of wheels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm definitely doing a narrow gauge module. I found this track plan a number of years ago, and I've kept it around for years. And it's one of those main 2-footer things.
The Franklin Somerset?
Yep.
Never heard of that one.
And I found this plan years ago, and I love it. And it has all the right things for a small switching layout. I can make the staging back here a cassette-based staging.
Yeah.
It's just the right. It has a lot of complexity for a small layout. And it has all the kind of cool, neat things that you would want to be able to show off locomotives by having ability over there and stuff. It's just, I really fell in love with this plan. I've never seen a layout that was built from it. I don't know where it came from, who built it, or who designed it, but I've had this track plan laying around for 10 years probably, and I absolutely mean to build a narrow gauge. You know, probably
that's ON2. Yep. I mean, unless that is the 2-footer that was Vermont. Is that either Vermont or Massachusetts?
Yeah, but that's what I want to do.
That's the first 2-footer, and then when people in Maine decided to start building railroads, they adopted that 2-foot standard, except for the Maine Central, which was standard gauge.
Well, and I always loved. I'm modeling early spring on my layout because it's unique. And most people model fall or midsummer, and I'm modeling some spring where I can have some see-through trees and some stuff like that. A lot of dry grass that hasn't came back. I wanted something a little bit unique without going to modeling winter or something. That's a little crazy. But I've always loved Paul Dokos's layout, modeling, Maine or.
Yeah. Well, here's another comment from our dear friend Bob.
Yeah.
HO equals hugely oversized N.
Yep.
Equals no, don't do it. You know what? I'd appreciate if you send me a copy of this plan, Andy. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I've kept it around because it's just perfect. And I've always wanted to do something with narrow gauge, and this is just a perfect little module for doing that.
Now I know where this is at. This is up near the Sandy River Range Lakes because there's the Carabasset River. But I thought this was the Franklin and Magantic, but maybe it was a Franklin Somerset. So yeah, the Carabasset River is the dead giveaway. This is definitely a Maine railroad.
Oh yes, and like I said, I fell in love with Paul Dokos's Boston and Maine set in fall, and I've always wanted to. I mean, I model Appalachian coal hauling railroads because I love them too, but I always kind of had a little fascination with doing something in New England. Early fall in New England, because there's a certain look to the structures and the scenery.
Yes.
I can understand it. There's just something about Maine in fall that's just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and I'm even looking over here. Here's the tracks going out, the diagram here, pointing off layout through Farmington, and then Strong, where the Strong Creamery is. So, yep, this is very familiar now that I'm looking at it.
And look how much operation you can have on such a small layout. If you had a cassette on both sides, even over here where it says A, if you had a cassette over here, You could easily pull trains from both sides. You could even have two railroads, from these two separate stages. You could have two railroads interchanging, track.
Right, yeah,
Two railroad,
absolutely.
one railroad that terminates. There's a couple
Yeah.
of runaround points. There's an engine facility. There's 4 or 5 places that you can spot cars. This is
Yep.
a very small layout with a tremendous amount of operational potential.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you could drop me that in an email, that'd be great, man.
Yep, I'll get you a copy.
All right, well, it's 11:25, folks, so I think we're going to go and call this one in the books. So, Andy, thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation.
Pleasure.
Thanks everybody else for attending. So, well, be sure to stay tuned for Johnny's Thursday night hangout coming up. And we will see you again next week on the Tuesday Night Hangouts and on the live show coming up for December. And me and Mike will be doing festive holiday lighting on the Model Railroad Tech Show for your model. So, should be some interesting things coming up. So, thanks, folks. Catch you soon.